Imagine waking up to the relentless sun rising over the desert, not in your own home, but in a crowded hut shared with many others. This was the reality for countless people in ancient Egypt, particularly during the New Kingdom period, roughly from 1550 BC to 1070 BC, or even much earlier during the Old Kingdom when the mighty pyramids of Giza were constructed, around 2580 to 2560 BC. Your life was not your own. You were a slave, a worker, a living tool in the hands of the all-powerful Pharaoh. This wasn't a choice, it was your fate, often from birth or after being captured in a faraway battle. Life as a slave under the Pharaoh was a complete change from any freedom you might have known. It meant every day was controlled, every meal was given, and every task was ordered. You had no rights in the way we understand them today. Your owner, whether it was the Pharaoh himself, a powerful priest, or a rich nobleman, could do almost anything they wanted with you. This wasn't just about hard work, it was about losing your identity, your family name, and often, your hope. But who exactly were these slaves, and how did they come to be in such a difficult situation? It's important to understand that the idea of a slave in ancient Egypt was not always the same as the harsh pictures we might have in our minds from other parts of history. While many people were certainly forced into labor and treated as property, there were different ways someone could become a slave. Some were prisoners of war. When the Pharaoh's army went to battle, they didn't just conquer lands, they brought back people. These people, often from Nubia, Syria, or Libya, were seen as trophies and put to work building Egypt's great empire. They were stripped of their old lives, their languages, and their gods, forced to serve new masters. Others became slaves because of debt. Imagine a poor farmer who had a bad harvest. He might borrow grain or money from a richer neighbor or a temple. If he couldn't pay it back, he, or even members of his family, could become a slave to pay off the debt. This wasn't always a forever thing. Sometimes, after a certain number of years, they might regain their freedom. But during that time, their life was not their own. Children born to slave parents also became slaves, continuing the cycle. Even some Egyptians could become slaves. If you committed a serious crime, you might be punished by being made a slave. Or in times of extreme poverty, families might even sell their children into slavery just to keep them from starving. It was a desperate choice, but one that sometimes happened in a world without safety nets or government help. Once you were a slave, your daily life was set by your owner and the needs of the Pharaoh. Most slaves were put to work on vast royal projects. Think of the enormous temples, the grand tombs in the Valley of the Kings, or the towering pyramids that still stand today. These weren't built by magic. They were built by the sweat and pain of thousands of workers, many of whom were slaves. Your day would start before dawn, often with a simple, meager breakfast, perhaps a piece of bread and some onions, maybe a little beer. Then it was off to work. The type of work depended on where you were assigned. If you were strong and young, you might be sent to the quarries, cutting heavy stone blocks. If you were skilled, you might work on carving decorations or making bricks. Women slaves often worked in homes, grinding grain, cooking, cleaning, or weaving. Some might even serve in temples, helping with rituals and offerings. The overseers, who were often free Egyptians or sometimes even trusted slaves given authority, would drive you relentlessly. Their job was to make sure the work got done, no matter the cost. They carried sticks, and they weren't afraid to use them. The sun beat down mercilessly, the dust got into your eyes and lungs, and your muscles ached constantly. There was no rest until the overseer called for it, and then it was usually just a short break for water and a moment to catch your breath. Evenings offered little comfort. You would return to your crowded living quarters, exhausted. The food would be basic: more bread, vegetables, maybe some dried fish. There was little privacy, little comfort. Illness was common, and medical care, if it existed for slaves, was basic at best. Many didn't live to old age. The hard labor and poor conditions took their toll. But even in this difficult life, people found ways to cope. They formed bonds with fellow slaves, sharing stories, small jokes, and dreams of a better life. They held on to their beliefs, sometimes secretly, sometimes openly, finding comfort in the gods. They found strength in each other, a shared understanding of their suffering. It wasn't freedom, but it was a small piece of humanity in a world that often denied it to them. Understanding this basic framework is key to truly grasping what life was like for these unseen builders of one of the world's greatest civilizations.
The sun rises again, a burning eye in the vast blue sky. For the slaves of ancient Egypt, this meant another day of back-breaking labor. Their bodies were the engines of the Pharaoh's will, powering the construction of an empire that still amazes us today. But what exactly did this hard labor involve? It wasn't just one job, it was 1,000 different tasks, each designed to wear down the human spirit and body. One of the most dangerous and demanding jobs was quarrying stone. Imagine working deep in the desert, far from the fertile Nile Valley, in places like Aswan for granite, Tura for limestone, or Hatnub for alabaster. These were vast open pits where giant blocks of stone, some weighing many tons, had to be cut from the earth. The tools were simple: copper chisels, stone hammers, and wooden wedges. Copper is a soft metal, so chisels dulled quickly and needed constant sharpening. The work was slow, brutal, and never-ending. Slaves would first identify a crack or a fault line in the rock. Then they'd use their hammers and chisels to make small channels around the block they wanted to cut. Once the channels were deep enough, they'd insert wooden wedges into them. Water would be poured over these wedges. As the wood soaked up the water, it would swell, slowly and with immense force, splitting the rock along the channels. The sound of the cracking stone, the shouts of the overseers, and the constant scrape of tools filled the air. Safety was not a priority. Rockfalls were common. A misstep could send you plunging into a crevice. The heat was unbearable, especially in the sun-baked quarries. Dust from the cutting filled the air, making it hard to breathe and slowly damaging lungs. Many workers suffered from eye infections, broken bones, and deep cuts. Water was rationed, and thirst was a constant companion. A slave's life in the quarry was often short, ended by accident, exhaustion, or illness. Once the massive stone blocks were cut, the next challenge began: transportation. How do you move a block of stone weighing 20, 50, or even 100 tons across miles of desert? It was done by human power. The blocks were loaded onto wooden sledges. Then hundreds, sometimes thousands of men would be harnessed to ropes, pulling the heavy sledges across specially prepared tracks. To reduce friction, liquids, possibly water or even milk, were sometimes poured in front of the sledges to make the sand slick. Picture this scene: a long line of men, their bare backs glistening with sweat, muscles straining, pulling together under the rhythmic chants of the overseers. Each step was a struggle. The ropes chafed their shoulders, the sand burned their feet, and the weight seemed impossible. If one man faltered, the whole line could be thrown off, and the overseers would be quick to punish any weakness. The journey from the quarry to the construction site could take days, weeks, or even months, depending on the distance. Even lighter loads were a test of endurance. Slaves carried baskets of sand, mud bricks, and smaller stones on their heads or shoulders. They hauled timbers, food, and water to the work sites. Every item needed for the enormous building projects had to be moved by hand. Imagine carrying water jugs up steep ramps to the top of a rising pyramid all day long under the scorching sun. Once at the construction site, other forms of labor awaited. If you weren't pulling, you were lifting. Huge wooden ramps were built, and slaves would drag the enormous blocks up these ramps using more ropes and human strength. This required incredible coordination. The overseers would shout commands, beating out a rhythm to ensure everyone pulled at the same time. A single mistake could cause a block to slip, crushing anyone in its path. Other slaves were put to work making mud bricks. Clay from the Nile, mixed with straw and water, was pressed into molds and left to dry in the sun. This was a messy, constant job. While perhaps not as dangerous as quarrying, it was endless and monotonous. Piles of bricks, enough to build entire villages, were needed for temples, administrative buildings, and worker housing. Still others were involved in digging canals. The Nile was the lifeblood of Egypt, and an elaborate system of canals was needed to bring water to fields and cities. Digging these canals meant endless hours with simple shovels and baskets, moving tons of earth. It was dirty, wet work, often done in swampy conditions, attracting mosquitoes and disease. Even when the work was lighter, such as grinding grain, weaving textiles, or tending fields for the pharaoh or a temple, it was still continuous and demanding. There was no concept of a weekend, no 8-hour workday. Work started at dawn and ended at dusk, only stopping for the briefest of meals. The constant physical exertion, coupled with poor nutrition and lack of rest, meant that the average slave had a short, hard life. Their bodies were literally sacrificed to build the glory of Egypt, their names often forgotten, but their sweat and strength forever etched into the stones of the pharaohs.
When the sun finally dipped below the horizon, painting the desert sky in shades of orange and purple, the grueling work would stop. But for the slaves, the end of work didn't mean true rest or comfort. It meant returning to the slave camps or worker villages, which were extensions of their hard labor. These were not homes in the sense we know them. They were functional places designed to house and control the vast workforce needed for the pharaoh's projects. Imagine rows upon rows of small mud brick huts. These were the living quarters. Each hut might be no bigger than a small room, but it would house several people. Sometimes a nuclear family, sometimes a group of unrelated men. Privacy was a luxury that simply did not exist. The walls were thick to keep out some of the desert heat, but inside it was often cramped, stuffy, and dark. A simple opening for a door, perhaps a small window high up on the wall, would be the only way for air and light to enter. Furnishings were almost non-existent. You might have a woven mat on the floor to sleep on, maybe a few clay pots for cooking and storage. Personal possessions were few: a worn garment, a small wooden amulet, a stone grinding tool. Everything was basic, practical, and replaceable. The focus was on survival, not comfort. Food was provided, but it was far from plentiful or varied. The staple diet consisted of bread, often made from coarse grain, which could be gritty and hard. Alongside this, there would be onions, garlic, and other vegetables that could be grown easily, like lentils or beans. Sometimes, if the pharaoh's granaries were full, there might be dried fish or a small amount of meat, but this was rare. Beer, a thick, nutritious, and mildly alcoholic drink, was also a common part of the ration. It provided calories and some hydration, but it was far from a gourmet meal. Water was crucial, especially in the desert. It had to be hauled from the Nile or from wells, a task often assigned to the younger slaves or those less able to do heavy construction. Clean water was vital, but purity was not always guaranteed, leading to frequent illnesses. Despite the harsh conditions, life in the camps wasn't completely without human connection.
Families, if they were lucky enough to be together, would try to maintain some semblance of family life. Parents would care for their children, teaching them what they could about survival and their heritage, even if it was slowly being eroded by their new reality. Children, from a young age, would be expected to contribute, often by carrying water, helping prepare food, or performing other small tasks. They would quickly learn that their future was already decided. They would follow in their parents' footsteps as slaves. Among the enslaved population, a kind of community would form. People from different regions, speaking different languages, would find common ground in their shared suffering. They would share stories, sing songs, and offer each other small bits of comfort. This informal network was incredibly important for mental survival. It was a way to resist the dehumanizing aspects of their lives, to hold on to a piece of their identity. There might even be a social hierarchy within the slave community itself. Some slaves, perhaps those with particular skills like stone carving, scribal knowledge, or weaving, might be given slightly better conditions or treated with a bit more respect by their overseers. These skilled slaves were valuable assets. They might even be given minor supervisory roles over less skilled workers, creating a complex web of relationships and power dynamics within the camp. Even in these camps, the reach of the pharaoh was present. Temples or shrines, sometimes small and simple, would be built within the worker villages. Here, slaves could offer their meager prayers to the gods, hoping for protection, a better afterlife, or perhaps secretly, for an end to their suffering. Religious festivals, though perhaps simplified, might have been observed, offering a rare break from the routine and a chance for communal celebration and expression. Evenings were a time for a brief respite. After their simple meal, people would gather outside their huts, talking quietly, perhaps sharing the day's events. The desert night, cool after the searing heat of the day, offered a sense of peace, however fleeting. Stars would fill the dark sky, a constant reminder of something vast and eternal, beyond the reach of any pharaoh. Yet the overseers were always nearby. Their watchful eyes ensured that no unrest brewed, no escape attempts were planned. The camps were designed to be self-contained and controlled. Any deviation from the strict rules would be met with swift and harsh punishment. But despite the constant threat, despite the exhaustion and despair, these communities clung to their humanity. They found strength in numbers, solace in shared experiences, and a quiet determination to endure, day after endless day, beneath the shadow of the pharaoh's mighty monuments. The monumental structures of ancient Egypt did not rise by mere command. They were built through an immense system of control. At the heart of this system was the pharaoh, seen as a living god whose word was law. But the pharaoh himself did not stand over every worker. His will was carried out by a vast network of officials, supervisors, and, most directly, the dreaded overseers. These were the men who ensured that the pharaoh's iron hand reached every slave, every day. Overseers were the direct managers of slave labor. They were often free Egyptians, sometimes military officers, or even trusted high-ranking slaves given authority over others. Their job was simple: get the work done, efficiently and without complaint. They were given broad powers, and their methods were often brutal. They carried sticks or whips, and they were not shy about using them. Imagine the scene at a quarry or a construction site. The air is thick with dust and sweat. The rhythmic sounds of hammers and chisels are punctuated by the sharp crack of a whip. An overseer stalks among the workers, his eyes missing nothing. He shouts commands, urging men to lift heavier, pull harder, work faster. If someone stumbles, if their pace slows, or if they dared to rest without permission, the whip descends. The pain is instant, a burning stripe across the back or legs. It serves as a warning not just to the one being punished, but to everyone within sight and earshot. Physical punishment was a daily reality. Beatings were common for minor infractions. For more serious offenses, such as trying to escape, stealing supplies, or openly defying an overseer, the punishments could be far more severe. We know from ancient texts and images that these could include mutilation, such as cutting off hands or feet, or even death. The goal was not just to punish the individual, but to create a powerful fear that would prevent anyone else from even thinking about rebellion or disobedience. The system of control went beyond direct punishment. It was built into the very structure of the slave's life. Slaves were often housed in segregated camps, surrounded by guards. Movement was restricted. They could not leave the work site or the camp without permission. Communication with the outside world was limited, preventing any organized resistance from forming. Food and water rations were another powerful tool of control. The amount of food a slave received was tied directly to their work output. If you didn't work hard enough, your rations might be cut. This meant that hunger was a constant threat, driving workers to push themselves even when their bodies were exhausted. It was a vicious cycle. Work hard to eat hard to work. Any illness or injury that prevented work could mean even less food, making recovery even harder. Psychological control was also key. Slaves were constantly reminded of their low status. They were referred to as property, not people. Their names might be changed. Their own cultural traditions and languages were often suppressed, forcing them to adopt Egyptian customs and the Egyptian language. This stripping away of identity was meant to break their spirit, making them more pliable and less likely to resist. Religious beliefs also played a part. The Pharaoh was considered a divine ruler, a god on earth. To defy him was not just a crime against the state, it was an act against the gods themselves. This belief system, deeply ingrained in Egyptian society, likely weighed heavily on the minds of the enslaved, especially those who had been born into it or had absorbed it over time. The promise of a better afterlife, controlled by the same gods who empowered the Pharaoh, might have offered some hope, but also reinforced the idea that their suffering in this life was their fate. Despite this harsh control, there were sometimes small acts of resistance, though rarely successful. Running away was the most common form of defiance, but the vast deserts and watchful patrols made it incredibly difficult. There are records of runaway slaves being caught and brought back, often facing even harsher punishments as a deterrent to others. Sometimes there might have been passive resistance, working slowly, breaking tools, or intentionally doing poor work, but such acts were risky and could quickly lead to severe retribution. The sheer number of overseers and guards, combined with the extreme consequences, meant that overt rebellion was almost unheard of. The Pharaoh's system of control was remarkably effective, ensuring that the endless flow of human labor continued day after day, year after year, to build an empire of stone that would last for millennia.
The lasting symbols of ancient Egypt are its incredible monuments, the towering pyramids, the majestic temples, and the intricate tombs. These structures were not just buildings, they were statements of power, faith, and a deep belief in the afterlife. And at their very foundation, literally and figuratively, was the forced labor of countless slaves. Building these wonders was the ultimate feat of ancient engineering and human endurance. Let's start with the pyramids, especially the Great Pyramid of Giza, built for Pharaoh Khufu around 2580 BC. It's an engineering marvel that still baffles modern minds. How did they build something so massive, so precise, with such simple tools? The answer lies in sheer human effort, organized on a scale almost impossible to imagine. This pyramid alone is made of over 2 million stone blocks, each weighing an average of 2.5 tons. Some, like the granite blocks in the King's Chamber, weigh up to 80 tons.
Moving these stones from quarries miles away, then lifting them hundreds of feet into the air was the primary job of the slaves. We've talked about the quarrying and the hauling, but getting these blocks into place was another challenge entirely. Workers used ramps, probably spiraling around the pyramid as it grew taller, or straight ramps extending from the ground. Imagine hundreds of men pulling a single 2.5-ton block up a ramp that is becoming steeper and longer with every layer of stone. The dust, the heat, the constant strain on muscles and sinews. This wasn't just physical strength, it required immense coordination. The overseers would use rhythmic chants and drums to keep the pace, to ensure everyone pulled at the same time, preventing the massive block from slipping backward and crushing those below. And it wasn't just about moving big blocks. The blocks had to fit together perfectly. While the final skilled work of carving and precise placement might have been done by free craftsmen, the rough dressing of the stone, ensuring it was mostly flat, and the difficult task of maneuvering it into position fell to the slaves. There was no cement in the modern sense. The stones fit so tightly that even a knife blade cannot be inserted between them in many places. This precision required careful planning and grueling effort. Beyond the pyramids, the pharaohs of the New Kingdom, from around 1550 BC, embarked on another building spree, enormous temples dedicated to their gods and to their own glory. Think of the Karnak temple complex or the Temple of Luxor. These weren't built with solid blocks in the same way as pyramids, but with vast halls filled with towering columns, intricately carved walls, and colossal statues. For these projects, slaves would again be tasked with quarrying stone, making millions of mud bricks for the core structures, and hauling immense quantities of materials. The columns at Karnak, for example, are gigantic, some over 60 feet tall and several feet thick. Moving and raising these monolithic pieces of stone required the same human-powered sledges, ropes, and ramps, but often in more confined spaces. The carving of the hieroglyphs and relief sculptures that covered every surface of these temples also required a large workforce. While the master sculptors and artists were free and highly skilled, slaves likely performed the initial heavy labor of smoothing the walls, preparing the surfaces, and perhaps even some of the initial rough carving under direction. Imagine chipping away at stone all day, trying to achieve a smooth, flat surface that an artist would later beautify. It was monotonous, dusty, and required unwavering focus. Building these structures also meant creating the infrastructure around them. Slaves dug canals to bring water and materials closer to the sites. They built temporary housing for the thousands of workers. They maintained the vast supply lines that fed and equipped the workforce. Every aspect of these enormous undertakings relied on a massive, organized, and largely unfree labor force. Beyond the physical labor, the sheer scale of the projects meant that life for slaves was dominated by these constructions. From dawn until dusk, their world was the quarry, the ramp, and the construction site. They lived in the shadow of these rising monuments, knowing that their entire existence was dedicated to building something that would outlast them by thousands of years. They were literally building eternity for their pharaohs, piece by painful piece. Many would die on these sites, their bones perhaps buried quickly in unmarked graves, their memory swallowed by the sands. Yet without their endless labor, their sweat, and their lives, the magnificent and enduring wonders of ancient Egypt would never have stood. They are the unseen hands and forgotten names behind the splendor that continues to awe us today, a testament to both human ingenuity and human suffering.
Despite the harshness, there was a quiet dignity that many slaves maintained. They endured. They found strength in numbers, in shared glances, in unspoken understanding. They witnessed the incredible beauty they were forced to create, the majesty of the temples and the precision of the pyramids. Perhaps some felt a strange pride in their unwilling contribution to something so grand, even as they longed for freedom. The echoes of their suffering and their silent hopes are carved into the very stones they laid. While their names are mostly lost to history, their spirits remain entwined with the monuments they built. Their lives were a testament to the extremes of human endurance, driven by the iron will of the Pharaoh, yet sustained by the fragile, indomitable spirit of humanity that sought solace, meaning, and perhaps a tiny whisper of hope, even in the deepest despair. In the midst of backbreaking labor and daily hardship, what did the slaves of ancient Egypt hold on to? What flickers of hope, what shadows of despair shaped their inner lives? For a people living under constant pressure, spiritual beliefs and personal thoughts became crucial for survival. Ancient Egypt was a land steeped in religion, and even for the enslaved, the gods and the promise of the afterlife were ever present. The official religion of Egypt revolved around a vast pantheon of gods and goddesses, with the pharaoh himself seen as a living god, a son of Ra, the sun god. This belief system was powerful, and it permeated every aspect of society. For the enslaved, especially those born into the system or captured at a young age, they would have been taught, or at least exposed to, these Egyptian beliefs. To defy the pharaoh was not just to defy a man, but to defy a god, a concept that added another layer of control and fear. However, many slaves were brought from foreign lands, Nubia, Syria, Libya. They arrived with their own gods, their own traditions, and their own understanding of the world. While these practices might have been suppressed, they were not easily forgotten. In the quiet of the slave camps, away from the watchful eyes of Egyptian overseers, these foreign slaves might have secretly held on to their ancestral beliefs, telling stories of their own gods, performing small, forbidden rituals. This would have been a vital way to maintain a connection to their past, to who they were before they became property. For those who adopted Egyptian beliefs, or for those born into them, the concept of the afterlife was central. The Egyptians believed that death was not an end, but a transition to another world, a beautiful field of reeds where one could live forever. However, entry to this afterlife was not guaranteed. It required proper burial, offerings, and a heart judged pure by the gods. For slaves, this presented a unique challenge. Their bodies might be quickly buried in unmarked graves without the rituals and offerings afforded to free Egyptians. This could lead to immense despair. The idea that their suffering in this life would extend into the next, that they might be denied eternal peace, was a heavy burden. Yet it could also offer a glimmer of hope. Perhaps they thought if they endured their hardship faithfully, if they prayed to the gods, a benevolent deity might intervene on their behalf in the afterlife. Some might have clung to the hope of being reborn free, or of finding justice in the spiritual realm that was denied to them in this life. Small amulets and charms, often secretly worn, might have been a source of personal comfort and protection. These simple objects, carved from wood or stone, depicting minor deities or symbols of good fortune, offered a silent plea for divine favor, a small defiance against the overwhelming forces that controlled their lives. These were personal connections to the divine, beyond the grand temples and official rituals. Beyond formal religion, the human spirit sought solace in other ways. Storytelling likely was a powerful tool. In the evenings after long days of labor, tales of heroes, of faraway lands, or of the cunning exploits of tricksters might have been shared. These stories, whether from their old homes or simple tales of everyday life, provided escape, entertainment, and a way to pass on knowledge and culture to the younger generation. Music, too, would have been a source of comfort. Simple songs, perhaps sung in unison while working or quietly in the evenings, could express shared sorrow, resilient hope, or simply provide a rhythm to endure.
These weren't grand melodies, but raw, heartfelt expressions of the human condition under duress.
From the quiet despair of the laborers, our gaze now shifts upwards to the towering figures who commanded their lives, the pharaohs. These were not just kings. They were seen as living gods, chosen by the heavens to rule Egypt. Their will was absolute, their power unimaginable, and their ambitions, quite literally, monumental. What drove a pharaoh to demand such immense labor, to build structures that scraped the sky and defied time? It was a complex mix of faith, power, and an unshakable desire for immortality. For a pharaoh, life on earth was just a temporary stop. Their ultimate journey was to the afterlife, where they would join the gods and continue to rule from beyond. To ensure a successful journey and eternal life, they needed a grand tomb, a place that would protect their body, their treasures, and their spirit, or Ka. The pyramids, the temples, the colossal statues, these were not just buildings, they were elaborate machines for eternity, built to safeguard the pharaoh's passage and ensure their everlasting presence among the divine. Every stone laid, every wall painted, was a step toward their own personal heaven. But it wasn't just about the afterlife. These projects were also massive statements of power. Imagine the message a towering pyramid sent to the people of Egypt and to any potential enemies. It screamed, "I am powerful. I command vast resources. I can make mountains rise from the desert." It showed the pharaoh's ability to organize, to mobilize, and to control thousands, even hundreds of thousands, of people. This display of might solidified their rule, reinforced their divine status, and inspired both awe and fear in their subjects. It was a physical manifestation of their absolute authority, a symbol that no one could challenge. Economically, these projects were huge undertakings, requiring an incredible amount of resources. Food had to be grown to feed the workers, tools had to be made and maintained, and materials like stone had to be quarried and transported. While we often focus on the human cost, these projects also stimulated the economy in many ways. They created jobs for skilled artisans, scribes, overseers, and administrators. They drove innovation in engineering and logistics. The sheer scale of the operation was a marvel of ancient organization, a testament to the pharaoh's capacity to manage an entire nation towards a single gigantic goal. And at the very base of this grand design were the laborers, many of them enslaved. To the pharaoh and their high-ranking officials, these individuals were largely seen as tools, a means to an end. Their personal lives, their suffering, their hopes and dreams held little importance when weighed against the divine mandate of the pharaoh. The construction of a pyramid or a temple was a sacred duty, a national endeavor, and the lives of individual workers were expendable in the pursuit of this greater, God-ordained purpose. This dehumanizing perspective allowed the pharaohs to justify the immense human cost. The laborers were not seen as people with rights, but as part of the landscape, much like the stone they quarried. They were part of the resources available to the pharaoh to be used, consumed, and discarded as needed. This mindset was deeply ingrained in the society where the ruling class believed their elevated status was divinely ordained, giving them absolute control over those beneath them. Even when workers were technically free citizens, conscripted for labor during the Nile's flood season, the line between free labor and forced labor often blurred. For those who were truly enslaved, perhaps captured in war or born into bondage, there was no pretense of choice. Their lives were dedicated, by force, to the pharaoh's eternal glory. The pharaoh's vision was all-encompassing. They dreamed of structures that would last for thousands of years, monuments that would speak of their greatness long after their bodies turned to dust. And they succeeded, The pyramids still stand, the temples still awe us with their scale and artistry. But behind every flawless block, every intricate carving, lies the invisible story of the countless hands that shaped them, the lives sacrificed to a king's ambition and a god's supposed will. The pharaohs were the architects of eternity, but the enslaved were the unseen, often forgotten foundation upon which that eternity was built.
While the monumental building sites were the scenes of relentless toil, the lives of the enslaved did not end when the sun set. They returned, often exhausted and broken, to their living quarters, the slave camps. These were not homes in any comfortable sense, but functional, tightly controlled settlements designed to house a vast workforce and ensure their continued availability for labor. Archaeologists have unearthed evidence of these camps, giving us a glimpse into the stark realities of daily existence. Imagine rows upon rows of simple mud brick dwellings, often cramped and basic. These were not built for comfort or personal space, but for efficiency. A typical dwelling might consist of a single room, perhaps with a small cooking area outside, shared by several individuals or even entire families. Privacy was a luxury few could afford. Food was central to survival, and its distribution was tightly controlled. The daily rations, though often meager, were carefully planned to provide enough energy for the demanding physical labor. Grain, especially barley for bread and beer, formed the staple. This was supplemented with dried fish, sometimes vegetables like onions and garlic, and occasionally a small portion of meat. The quality and quantity of food could vary greatly, depending on the season, the pharaoh's generosity, or the efficiency or corruption of the overseers. Sickness and hunger were constant companions, weakening bodies already pushed to their limits. Water, vital in the desert climate, was another crucial resource. It had to be transported to the camps, often from the Nile or wells, and its distribution was strictly monitored. Access to clean water was a constant struggle, and contaminated water sources could lead to outbreaks of disease, decimating the already vulnerable population. Despite the harsh conditions, life in the camps wasn't entirely devoid of human connection. People are resilient, and even in slavery, they sought comfort and companionship. Families, if they were allowed to stay together, tried to maintain some semblance of normal life. Parents would try to protect their children, teaching them what they knew, preparing them for a life of service. Marriages, though possibly informal or unrecognized by the authorities, would have occurred, forming new bonds and networks of support. However, the concept of a stable family unit was often threatened by the system of slavery itself. Children born to enslaved parents were automatically considered enslaved. Families could be separated, either through sale, transfer to different work sites, or as punishment. This constant threat of separation added another layer of fear and insecurity to their already precarious existence. Control within the camps was absolute. Overseers, often Egyptian, were ever present, ensuring order, enforcing rules, and preventing any signs of unrest. Life revolved around the work schedule. Waking before dawn, working until dusk, and then a brief period for rest and food before the cycle began anew. There was little time or energy for anything else. Punishment was a constant threat. Disobedience, idleness, or any attempt to escape would be met with swift and brutal consequences. Floggings were common, sometimes to the point of death. Branding or mutilation might have been used to mark escapees or rebels, serving as a terrifying warning to others. The fear of punishment was a powerful tool, keeping the enslaved in line and extinguishing any flicker of defiance. Sanitation in the camps was rudimentary at best. Waste disposal was a challenge, and the close proximity of many people, combined with poor hygiene, created fertile ground for diseases to spread rapidly. Infections, dysentery, tuberculosis, and other ailments would have been rampant, and with little to no medical care available to the enslaved, many would have succumbed to illness.
The slave camps were in essence an extension of the pharaoh's will, a logistical necessity to fuel the grand projects. They were places where human beings were reduced to their most basic functions: eating, sleeping, and working. Yet even within these harsh confines, the human spirit, though crushed, never fully broke. Whispers of stories, shared meals, small acts of kindness — these were the fragile threads that wove together a semblance of community, a testament to the enduring human need for connection, even under the most oppressive weight of existence.
In the face of such overwhelming power and ceaseless suffering, it is natural to wonder about resistance. Did the enslaved ever fight back? Did they try to escape? The historical record for large-scale slave rebellions in ancient Egypt is notably thin, especially when compared to other ancient societies like Rome or Greece. This doesn't mean defiance didn't exist, but rather highlights the immense, almost impossible odds against such acts succeeding. The pharaoh's rule was absolute, backed by a highly organized state and a strict military presence. Any form of open rebellion would have been met with swift, brutal, and overwhelming force. The enslaved were often a mix of different ethnic groups, captured from various foreign lands, speaking different languages, and having different customs. This diversity, while sometimes a source of quiet resilience, also made it incredibly difficult to unite them into a cohesive fighting force against a well-armed and disciplined Egyptian army. Moreover, the system itself was designed to prevent widespread uprising. Workers were often kept under constant surveillance by overseers and guards. They were organized into work gangs, which might have been intentionally mixed to prevent strong bonds from forming that could lead to rebellion. Information and communication would have been severely limited, making it hard to plan or coordinate any large-scale actions. Despite these formidable obstacles, individual acts of defiance and small-scale resistance undoubtedly occurred. Perhaps a deliberate slowdown of work, a sabotage tool, a stolen ration, or a whispered complaint. These small acts, though not outright rebellion, were ways of subtly pushing back against the dehumanizing system. The consequences for even these minor infractions, however, could be severe, as any challenge to authority was seen as a threat to the pharaoh's divinely ordained order. The most common form of active resistance was probably escape. Imagine the desperation it would take to flee into the vast, unforgiving desert, or to try and disappear into the bustling towns along the Nile. The chances of success were incredibly slim. If caught, the consequences were terrifying. Punishments for attempting to escape were designed to be public and exemplary, instilling fear in the remaining enslaved population. Flogging was a common punishment, often carried out in public to serve as a deterrent. Beatings could be so severe as to cause permanent injury or death. More extreme punishments, though less commonly documented specifically for runaway slaves, could include mutilation, such as cutting off a nose or ears, branding, or even execution. The message was clear: resistance was futile, and freedom came at an unspeakable cost. To prevent escapes and maintain order, the pharaohs relied on a vast network of administrators, scribes, and guards. The overseers at the work sites and in the camps were the immediate enforcers of the pharaoh's will. Beyond them, a kind of slave police or specialized units might have been employed to track down runaways. Communities along the Nile would likely have been encouraged or even compelled to report any suspicious individuals, making it incredibly difficult for an escaped slave to blend in. The geography of Egypt itself also acted as a natural prison. The fertile ribbon of the Nile was surrounded by vast, harsh deserts. To escape Egypt meant traversing these deadly landscapes, or to attempt to cross borders that were often heavily guarded. Without resources, knowledge of the land, or allies, the odds were stacked against them. The goal of the pharaoh's iron fist was not just to punish, but to utterly break the spirit of resistance. The constant threat of violence, the exhaustion,
The hunger, the separation from loved ones, all these factors combined to create an environment where open rebellion was almost unthinkable for the vast majority. The system was designed to instill a profound sense of helplessness and fear, ensuring that the colossal monuments would rise no matter the human cost. While grand uprisings might not fill the history books, the individual struggles, the quiet acts of defiance, the desperate attempts at escape, and the unimaginable suffering endured by those who dared to seek freedom are all part of the unwritten history of ancient Egyptian slavery. They stand as a testament to the enduring human desire for liberty, even when crushed under the most ruthless and systematic forms of control.
When we think of Egyptian slavery, our minds often conjure images of endless lines of laborers dragging massive stones for pyramids. While this was a very real and significant aspect of forced labor, the system of slavery in ancient Egypt was far more complex and pervasive, extending into every corner of society. Not all enslaved people toiled under the desert sun on monumental projects. Many lived in the bustling households of the wealthy, the workshops of skilled artisans, and the sacred spaces of temples, their lives shaped by different, though no less restrictive, forms of bondage. Domestic slaves formed a significant portion of the enslaved population. These individuals were owned by noble families, government officials, priests, and even wealthier commoners. Their lives were intimately connected to the families they served. They performed a vast array of tasks that kept the household running: cooking, cleaning, grinding grain, fetching water, tending to children, weaving cloth, and acting as personal attendants. While their physical labor might not have been as brutally demanding as quarry work, their lives were often filled with ceaseless tasks, a complete lack of personal freedom, and constant subjugation to their master's whims. Domestic slaves could vary greatly depending on the household. Some masters might have been relatively benign, treating their slaves as valued, if still unfree, members of their extended household. Others could be cruel and abusive, with little legal recourse for the enslaved person. A domestic slave might have had more access to food and shelter than a field worker, but they also faced a different kind of imprisonment, a social one, trapped within the confines of their master's home and completely dependent on their goodwill. Children born to domestic slaves were usually considered slaves themselves, continuing the cycle of bondage. These children would grow up learning the duties of the household, often taking over from their parents. They might have formed strong bonds with the children of their masters, sometimes even acting as playmates. But the fundamental power imbalance always remained. Beyond domestic service, some enslaved individuals possessed valuable skills or were trained to become artisans. These skilled slaves were highly prized. They might work alongside free craftsmen in workshops, producing everything from intricate jewelry and fine pottery to elegant furniture and decorative tomb paintings. Their expertise was crucial to the creation of the beautiful objects that define ancient Egyptian art. While their skills might have afforded them certain privileges, perhaps better food, slightly more comfortable living conditions, or exemption from the heaviest manual labor, they were still slaves. Their work, their talents, and the fruits of their labor belonged entirely to their owners. Temple slaves represented another significant group. Temples were not just places of worship, they were immense economic entities, owning vast tracts of land, managing workshops, and employing numerous personnel. Enslaved individuals in temples might have worked in the temple fields, cultivated crops, prepared offerings, maintained the temple grounds, or even served in various roles within the temple hierarchy, always in a subordinate position. The lives of these unseen laborers offer a different perspective on ancient Egyptian slavery.
Their proximity to their masters or to centers of wealth sometimes meant slightly better material conditions, but it also often came with a more insidious form of control. They were often isolated from larger groups of enslaved people, making organized resistance even harder. Their value to their masters, whether as a skilled artisan, a loyal domestic servant, or a productive temple worker, might have offered them a measure of perceived security, but it also meant their freedom was even less likely to be granted. These varied forms of slavery highlight that being enslaved in ancient Egypt was not a single experience. It was a spectrum of forced labor, each with its own specific challenges, indignities, and rare moments of fleeting humanity. From the dust and sweat of the quarry to the quiet corners of a wealthy home, the lives of the enslaved, regardless of their role, were always defined by the fundamental lack of personal liberty, forever bound to the will of another.
In ancient Egypt, death was not seen as an end, but a transition. For the pharaohs and the elite, immense resources were poured into preparing for the afterlife, ensuring their eternal journey was grand and well-equipped. But what of the enslaved? What became of their bodies and their hopes for eternity when their arduous lives finally came to a close? The contrast between the lavish burials of the rich and the simple, often anonymous graves of the enslaved is one of the starkest indicators of their place in society. For the pharaoh, death meant the elaborate mummification process, taking weeks, even months to complete. Their body would be carefully preserved, organs removed and stored in canopic jars, all according to sacred rituals. They would be laid to rest in magnificent tombs, filled with treasures, spells, and provisions for the afterlife. Their name, meticulously carved on every wall, would ensure their eternal memory and continued existence. For the enslaved, the reality was far different. When a slave died, their body was likely disposed of quickly and without much ceremony. Mummification was an expensive and time-consuming process, reserved for those who could afford it, and that certainly did not include the enslaved. Their bodies might have been wrapped in simple linen or just a mat, if anything at all, and buried in shallow, unmarked graves. Archaeological discoveries have sometimes revealed mass graves near major construction sites or slave camps. These are grim testaments to the high mortality rates among the laborers who died from exhaustion, accidents, disease, or punishment. These mass graves often lack any personal effects, any inscriptions, or any indication of who the individuals were. They are anonymous burials, reflecting the anonymous lives they lived, their identities erased by the sheer scale of the undertaking and the indifference of their masters. Individual burials, if they occurred, would have been very basic. A simple pit in the ground, perhaps with the body placed in a fetal position, facing west towards the land of the dead. There would be no coffins, no elaborate grave goods, no protective amulets, and certainly no carefully prepared spells or prayers to guide them through the underworld. These were utilitarian burials, focused on merely disposing of the body rather than preparing the deceased for a glorious afterlife. Ancient Egyptian religious beliefs held that everyone, regardless of social standing, had a ka, or life force, and a ba, or personality or soul, that could journey to the afterlife. However, the success of this journey was heavily dependent on proper burial rituals, preservation of the body, and provisions for the journey. For the enslaved, lacking all these, their prospects for a comfortable or even a guaranteed afterlife were dim. Their ka might wander without a home. Their ba might struggle to find its way. This doesn't mean the enslaved had no personal beliefs or hopes for what lay beyond. It's plausible that they clung to their own ancestral beliefs or adapted aspects of Egyptian religion, hoping for some form of peace or freedom after death. But the official, state-sanctioned religious system of Egypt offered little comfort or formal recognition to the enslaved in their death.
The anonymous nature of their graves ensured that their names, their stories, and their individual sacrifices were lost to time. While the pharaohs sought immortality through their grand monuments and meticulously prepared tombs, the enslaved found only oblivion. Their physical existence erased from the historical record, their spiritual journey left to chance. The death of an enslaved person was, for the pharaoh's administration, largely an administrative matter. One less worker to feed, one more body to dispose of. There was no mourning period, no elaborate rites, no recognition of their humanity. Their lives were consumed by labor, and their deaths were swallowed by the earth, leaving behind only the imposing structures they helped build, silent witnesses to their untold suffering and forgotten ends. The contrast serves as a stark reminder of the profound inequalities that defined ancient Egyptian society, extending even into the realm of the afterlife.
The sun still rises over the ancient land of Egypt, casting long shadows across the monuments that have stood for millennia. The pyramids, the temples, the colossal statues, they are silent, enduring testaments to the power of the pharaohs, the brilliance of Egyptian engineers, and the sheer force of human will. But they are also a testament to immense human suffering, built on the backs of countless men, women, and children, many of whom lived and died in bondage. As we conclude our journey through the life of an enslaved person under the pharaoh, we must reflect on the lasting legacy of these chains and how we understand this history today. The impact of slave labor on ancient Egyptian society was profound and complex. Economically, it provided an almost limitless, cheap workforce that allowed for the undertaking of projects on a scale unparalleled in the ancient world. It fueled the construction boom, enabling the pharaohs to consolidate their power, display their wealth, and ensure their eternal legacy. This labor was a cornerstone of the vast agricultural system, the mining operations, and the artisan workshops that drove the Egyptian economy. Socially, the presence of enslaved people reinforced the rigid class structure of ancient Egypt. It placed a clear bottom tier in society, allowing the elite to enjoy their privileged lives free from the most grueling work. The system was a constant reminder of who held power and who was powerless. It shaped daily life, cultural norms, and even religious practices, which largely ignored the plight of the enslaved. Politically, the control of a large enslaved population was a crucial aspect of the pharaoh's authority. The ability to mobilize and control such a workforce was a key indicator of state power and organizational prowess. It served as a visible display of the pharaoh's strength, both internally to their subjects and externally to neighboring kingdoms. Today, as we look at these magnificent structures, our understanding is far more nuanced. We can marvel at the engineering genius, the artistic skill, and the grand vision that brought them into being. But we can no longer ignore the human cost. Modern archaeology and historical research continue to uncover more about the lives of these laborers, challenging older narratives that sometimes downplayed or ignored the reality of slavery. The ethical implications of such forced labor are something we grapple with deeply in the modern world. The idea that human beings could be treated as mere tools, their lives disposable in the pursuit of another's glory, is morally repugnant to contemporary sensibilities. We learn from this history not just about how empires were built, but about the dangers of unchecked power, the dehumanizing effects of exploitation, and the importance of valuing every human life. The silence of the stones often speaks loudest. While the names of the pharaohs are immortalized, the names of those who built their monuments are largely lost. Yet their presence is undeniable. Their fingerprints are on every stone, their sweat soaked into the desert sands, their breath exhaled into the air that still circulates within the ancient tombs. The very existence of these structures is a testament to their labor and their endurance. Our modern gaze seeks not to diminish the achievements of ancient Egypt, but to understand them fully, in all their grandeur and their brutality.
It is a reminder that history is not just about kings and conquerors, but about the countless, often nameless individuals whose lives formed the foundation of these civilizations. By acknowledging the suffering of the enslaved, we give them a voice that was denied in their lifetime. We recognize their humanity, even if their masters did not. The legacy of chains in ancient Egypt is a powerful lesson. It teaches us about the extremes of human ambitions and the depths of human resilience. It reminds us that behind every grand narrative of empire, there are countless personal stories of struggle, hope, and despair. The monuments stand, eternal and unyielding, but they now carry a heavier weight. The invisible burden of the lives that built them, echoing through the corridors of time, urging us to remember, to learn, and to strive for a world where no human being is ever again considered a mere tool in another's grand design.